Every single day, you click, you buy, you share things online, all of it is protected by this digital shield you trust, but, probably never really see. But what happens when that invisible shield has a crack? Let's dive into that.
And that's really the core idea we're digging into here. We're going to look at one of the most fundamental vulnerabilities that can hit the secure web, something called a buffer overflow, specifically in OpenSSL, the very software that's supposed to be standing guard.
So to kick things off, let's just set the stage a bit. What exactly is this digital shield that we all rely on so much? Well, you see it all the time. That little lock icon up in your browser's address bar, that's your cue. It tells you that HTTPS is active, and it's using these protocols, SSL or TLS, to encrypt the connection between you and whatever website you're on. And the engine making so much of this possible behind the scenes, that's OpenSSL. It powers a huge chunk of the internet. So you can see why its health is kind of, our collective digital health.
And pretty much all of the secure traffic, it flows through one specific digital doorway, port 443. Just think of it like the official, heavily guarded entrance for all the secure data zipping around the web. It is the front door that OpenSSL is meant to be protecting.
Okay, so now let's get to that crack in the shield. The technical term for it is a buffer overflow, which I know it sounds super complicated. But trust me, a really simple analogy makes it all click.
So what is a buffer overflow, technically speaking? Well, every program sets aside these little boxes in its memory. They're called buffers, and they're designed to hold data. A buffer overflow is just what happens when a program tries to stuff way more data into that box than it was ever built to hold.
Right, yeah, I know. That's still pretty abstract, so let's make it physical. Let's talk about something simple, like getting mail.
Okay, so imagine a server's memory is a perfectly sized mailbox. Now, an attacker, instead of sending a normal letter, sends this giant rolled-up poster. The mail carrier, who's not paying attention, tries to jam it in anyway. But of course it doesn't fit. It overflows, it spills out, it probably breaks the mailbox door, and maybe even knocks over the mailbox right next to it. That is the overflow. It creates this huge mess by overwriting stuff in the memory next to it that it was never, ever supposed to touch.
So, okay, we've got this vulnerability, this overflowing mailbox. But how does a hacker actually use that to cause real, actual damage?
Well, it's basically a four-step heist. First, the attacker sends their oversized letter, a malicious request, straight to that guarded front door, port 443. Second, the vulnerable OpenSSL software doesn't bother to check the size and just tries to process it. Third, the overflow happens, which gives the attacker access to the memory sitting right next door to the intended buffer. And finally, and this is the really scary part, the attacker can then read that adjacent memory, which could have anything in it, and have that sensitive data sent right back to them.
And look, this isn't just some thought experiment. The infamous Heartbleed bug, it worked on this exact principle. It let attackers just peek into a server's memory and pull out passwords, private keys, you name it. The real damage, though, was deeper. It wasn't just about stealing data. It was about shaking the very foundation of trust we all have in the secure web. All of a sudden, that little lock icon, it didn't feel quite so safe anymore.
Which brings us to the most important question of all. Why does this nerdy, technical glitch actually matter to you? What's the real-world consequence here?
The potential damage is huge, and it really falls into three main buckets. First, you've got data leakage. That's your private info, your passwords, your keys, all getting stolen. Second is something called remote code execution, which is even scarier. That's like a hacker not just peeking into your house, but actually getting the keys and taking control of it. And third, there's denial of service, where the attacker just crashes the server, knocking the whole website offline for everybody.
And let's be crystal clear about what's at stake. We're not talking about anonymous server logs. We're talking about the keys to the entire digital kingdom. The private keys that prove a website is who it says it is, and, most importantly, your passwords and your personal information.
Okay, so that was all the bad news. But the good news is, this crack can absolutely be fixed. So let's talk about how we can reinforce that digital shield and make it strong again.
The path forward is actually pretty logical. For every problem, there's a direct solution. Is the code outdated and vulnerable? You update it to the latest version. Is the server using weak old settings? You disable them. And to find those weaknesses you don't even know about yet, you have to perform regular security audits and tests. It's really all about constant maintenance.
But seriously, if you take away only one single thing from this, let it be this. The absolute #1 defense against these kinds of attacks is simply keeping your software updated. Those patches and updates are released for a reason. They fix the cracks as they're discovered.
And that kind of leaves us with this one final, pretty sobering thought. We fixed this one, sure, but the digital world is built on millions and millions of lines of code, all written by humans. Our trust is placed in a system that demands constant, unending vigilance. The battle to protect that digital shield, well, it's never really over.